They say nothing good happens after 3 a.m., but no one ever tells you why. Some believe it's the witching hour, when the veil between the living and the dead grows thin, when whispers turn into voices and shadows start moving on their own. Maybe it's when the world goes so quiet that we can finally hear what has been here all along. Tonight you'll hear 4 true encounters from those who stayed awake past 3 a.m. and found out what happens when something else is awake with them. So turn off your lights, settle into the dark, and listen closely, because when the clock strikes 3 o'clock, you might not be alone anymore. Emily was a nurse who worked long night shifts at a city hospital. Every morning, around 2:45 a.m., she came home exhausted, tossed her bag on the floor, and collapsed straight into bed without even changing her scrubs. Her apartment was small and quiet, the kind of place that should have felt safe. But one night she woke up suddenly. The room was freezing cold, her breath fogging in the air. That's when she noticed the mirror. It stood across from her bed, catching the faint light from the street outside. She stared at her reflection until her reflection blinked. Only she hadn't. The reflection's eyes met hers, its mouth slowly curving into a smile that stretched far too wide. Then it raised a hand and waved. Emily screamed and switched on the lamp, heart pounding, and the reflection instantly returned to normal. She told herself it was exhaustion, a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. But it happened again the next night, and the next. Every night, exactly at 3:03 a.m., her reflection would move when she didn't, sometimes tilting its head, sometimes mouthing words she couldn't understand. She tried sleeping on the couch, covering the mirror, even turning it to face the wall. But each night she could still feel eyes on her, cold and steady, watching from somewhere unseen. Finally, Emily set up her phone to record while she slept. The next morning, she sat in bed, trembling as she played the video back. What she saw made her drop the phone. Her reflection was standing in the mirror long after she had fallen asleep. Then it stepped out of the glass and walked into the room. The police found her phone still recording, the bed empty, the mirror cracked down the center. No sign of struggle, no trace of Emily. But if you look closely at that cracked mirror today, you can still make out a faint silhouette inside, smiling, waiting to be seen. It was supposed to be a dumb YouTube challenge. 4 friends snuck into the abandoned St. Mary's Hospital, which had been left untouched since the fire of 1998. They entered just past midnight, laughing, recording everything for their channel. Their flashlights cut through the thick dust and peeling paint, the air heavy with the smell of ash and mold. They joked about ghosts and urban legends, their laughter echoing through empty hallways. But everything changed around 2:57 a.m. The footage, later recovered by police, shows them entering the old maternity ward. The walls were burned black, but rows of tiny rusted cribs still lined the room. Then, faintly, a sound. A baby crying. At first they laughed, accusing each other of playing tricks. But then another sound followed, soft, broken words. A woman's voice whispering, "Shh." They froze, flashlight shaking as they scanned the room. The camera caught one of them whispering, "Do you guys hear that?" The air turned ice cold. The crying grew louder. At the far end of the corridor, one of the hospital beds began to rock gently, back and forth, its metal legs scraping against the floor. The sound echoed down the hall. Suddenly, the group panicked and ran, their flashlights swinging wildly. For a split second, the camera turned back and caught something pale crawling across the ceiling. its limbs bent the wrong way, moving fast. Only 3 of the 4 friends made it out. The 4th, Daniel, was never found. Police said he must have gotten lost or trapped in the ruins. But when the video was leaked online, viewers noticed something in the final frame. A pale hand gripping Daniel S.'s shoulder just before the screen cut to static. If you listen closely, right before the footage ends, you can still hear the faint sound of a baby crying. Jorge was a night security guard at an old apartment complex downtown. The building had seen better days. Flickering lights, cracked tiles, and a long hallway that always smelled faintly of dust and rain. He worked the graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., and most nights were uneventful. Until one night, right at 3 a.m., he heard it. Footsteps, small and quick, like a child running up and down the hall. He checked every camera feed, nothing there. He walked each floor, empty, but the sound kept following him, always one floor above, always staying out of reach. The next night, it happened again. Footsteps, then a faint giggle, a child's laugh echoing through the silence. He grabbed his flashlight and called out, "Hello? Is someone here?" No answer, just the echo of his own voice bouncing off the walls. Then, from behind him, a whisper, soft, playful. He turned, heart racing, but the corridor was empty. He walked toward the elevator, his flashlight trembling. The doors opened on their own. The elevator was empty, but in the corner of the floor, there was a small wet footprint. He backed away slowly and returned to the security booth, his hands shaking as he stared at the monitors. That's when he saw it. On the screen, there he was, standing in the hallway. But behind him, a small child was holding his hand. The footage flickered, then went black. When the morning shift arrived, Jorge was gone. His coffee was still warm, the monitor still on. The final frame captured him sitting perfectly still, eyes wide open, a tiny hand resting on his shoulder. To this day, new guards claim they still hear the sound of footsteps running down the hall around 3 a.m., followed by a child 3 a.m.'s giggle. Lena moved into her new apartment just a week before her birthday. It was small but cozy, a good deal for the price. The first 2 nights were peaceful, but on the 3rd, she woke around 3:12 a.m. to the sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was coming from the neighboring unit, but when she checked the next morning, the landlord told her that apartment was empty. The next night, she heard it again, soft whispers through the wall. This time, she pressed her ear against the plaster, and what she heard made her blood run cold. The whisper was saying her name, over and over. "Lena, Lena, look behind you." She spun around, nothing. But then came the tapping, faint, rhythmic from inside the wall itself. She could almost feel it through her fingertips, like someone trying to claw their way out. The next morning, she called her landlord, her voice shaking. He laughed it off, saying, "Old pipes, that building does that sometimes." But Lena knew what she'd heard. That night, she set her phone to record and left it on the nightstand near the wall. When she played the recording the next morning, she almost dropped the phone. Over the static and muffled breathing, a voice whispered clearly, "Let me out." Days later, maintenance came to check the walls after neighbors complained about a strange smell. When they opened the plaster, they found a small crawl space sealed shut. Inside was a body, mummified, still wearing a necklace, identical to the one Lena wore every day. No one ever figured out who she was or how she knew Lena's name. After that day, the apartment stayed empty, But tenants next door sometimes say that if you press your ear to the wall at 3 a.m., you can still hear a faint whisper, "Let me out." Maybe 3 a.m. isn't cursed. Maybe it is just when the world grows so still that we finally notice what has been around us all along. The quiet hum of something unseen, the breath against the back of your neck, the reflection that doesn't quite move when you do. Some people fear the dark, but maybe it's not the darkness that is dangerous. Maybe it's what wakes up inside it. So tonight, when you look at your phone and see 2:59, ask yourself, do you really want to know what happens when the clock hits 3, right? Because once it does, you might not be the only one awake anymore. Then, almost too soft to notice, a whisper. Good night, my listener.